Overheard my wife planning to meet her married ex from university during our honeymoon in the Andes. So I canceled her return train and left her stranded at the ECO lodge after 3 weeks of marriage. I still remember the way her hand felt in mine as we stepped out of the Brussels City Hall. Not cold or nervous, but calm, steady, like someone who knew exactly where she was headed. My name's Julian. I'm 31, born and raised in Ghent, but for the last 5 years, I've been working out of Antwerp as a marine engineer. Not the most romantic profession, I know, but the sea kept me honest, focused. That morning, though, all I cared about was her. Celeste wore a simple cream-colored dress with a gold sash she'd found in a vintage shop in Leuven. Nothing flashy, no bridesmaids, no music, just 2 signatures, 2 witnesses, and a bottle of overpriced champagne we popped right there on the steps. That was her idea, always a little unconventional, but precise. Everything had a reason, a logic behind it. We'd been together for a little over 2 years, met at a dinner party hosted by mutual friends. She taught art history at the university, Baroque architecture, specifically. Knew more about domes and stonework than most people know about their own families. And when she talked about it, you'd think she was describing lovers. Her whole face would change. She planned every detail of our honeymoon months in advance. An eco-lodge perched in the Andes, high up near the cloud forests of Ecuador. Solar-powered suites, organic meals, llama trails, open-air soaking tubs. It's my dream trip, she'd whispered once, curled against my chest, her breath warm and sleepy, like living in the sky. I spared no expense. Used my annual bonus and dipped into savings. Every booking, every upgrade, every transfer. If this was her dream, I wanted to be the one who made it come true. When we finally arrived, I couldn't stop staring. The place was unreal, like something out of a coffee table book. The main lodge sat nestled into a slope, the entire structure made from polished stone and glass that reflected the sky like water. Birds I'd never seen before darted through the air like tiny kites. Celeste was glowing, not from the altitude or the sun, though both were strong, but from something deeper. She'd been snapping photos nonstop since we landed. Her blog was her passion project. Travel through an artist's eyes, she called it. I always just called it Celeste being Celeste. We spent the first night wrapped in alpaca blankets beside a wood-burning stove, sipping coca tea and listening to the wind slide across the windows like a slow exhale. I kept looking at her, her legs folded beneath her, her journal balanced on her lap, and thinking, this is it. This is the start of everything. Later, as we lay in the dark, she reached for my hand under the covers. This was perfect, she murmured. Thank you for making it happen. I kissed her knuckles one by one. We made it happen, I said, and I meant it. With every cell in my body, I believed we were standing on the edge of something beautiful, something real, a new life built on love, trust, and this shared sense of adventure. I didn't know it yet, but up there in the clouds, something else was waiting too, something I never saw coming. The altitude hit me hard the next morning. I'd read the pamphlets, the guide's warnings, even brought the medication Celeste had slipped into our bag, but nothing prepared me for the way it crawled into my chest, tight and relentless, like someone was sitting on my lungs. By mid-afternoon on our second day, I couldn't do it anymore. You sure you'll be okay? Celeste asked, her hiking boots laced up, camera swinging from her neck. I nodded, forcing a smile. Just need to rest a bit. I'll meet you for dinner. She kissed my forehead, quick and distracted. Text me if it gets worse, okay? Then she was gone. The walk back to our suite wasn't long, but it felt like a trek, every step heavier than the last. By the time I reached the room, my head was pounding. I dropped onto the couch near the fireplace and closed my eyes, focusing on my breath. In, out, slow. That's when I heard her voice, muffled through the open glass doors leading out to the veranda. Light, cheerful, but with a strange undertone I couldn't quite place. I didn't mean to eavesdrop. I just sat there, still and dazed, the way you do when you're too tired to move but too alert to sleep. And then I caught the name. Elias. I frowned. She was laughing. No, I haven't told him. Of course not. He's too busy making sure the towels are folded properly and the Wi-Fi password works. Another laugh, sharper this time. Yeah, I know. But you should have seen him when we landed. He was like a kid at Christmas. I almost felt guilty. Almost. There was a pause. Then her voice softened into something I hadn't heard before. Elias, it's different with you. It always was. I needed to see if I could build something stable. Something sensible. Julian is all spreadsheets and schedules. You're a beat. You're real. The silence that followed punched harder than her words. I sat frozen, suddenly aware of the itch behind my eyes, the way the fire crackled just a little too loud. I felt like I was watching a movie I wasn't supposed to see, a version of Celeste I'd never met. She giggled again, lower now. He flies back Sunday. I told you. I'll meet you in Bogota the day after. The breath I didn't know I was holding collapsed in my chest. She wasn't just cheating. She was planning the next chapter. Her chapter. The one that didn't include me. Elias still has the studio, right? She asked. Maybe I could stay with him a while, just until I figure things out. A while. I stood, limbs stiff, moved quietly to the edge of the sliding door and peeked through the curtain. She was leaning on the railing, phone pressed to her ear, when tugging at her hair, smiling, alive in a way I hadn't seen all trip. Something inside me broke. Not loud, just clean. A single, decisive crack. I stepped back, sat down, and stared at the flames. She didn't know I heard. Not yet, but everything had changed. I barely slept that night. I kept turning over the same thoughts, same phrases. Her voice, that laugh. He's too busy making sure the towels are folded properly. I lay awake while she snored softly beside me, breathing deep, and even like her conscience was as clear as the mountain air. At sunrise, I was already out of bed, quietly folding my clothes, packing with clinical precision. I didn't slam drawers or yank zippers. I didn't want a dramatic scene. I wanted clarity. She stirred as I closed my suitcase. "Jules," she murmured, blinking up at me. "What time is it?" "Early," I said flatly. She sat up, rubbing her eyes. "Where are you going?" I didn't answer right away. I zipped the last pouch, then turned to face her. "I heard you yesterday." Her brow furrowed, confused. "What?" "On the veranda. Talking to Dana about Elias. About Bogota. About meeting him after I leave." Silence. Then something flickered in her expression. Surprise, maybe, or calculation. "You were eavesdropping?" I laughed once, bitter and short. "That's your takeaway?" She threw the blankets off and stood up, crossing her arms. "You listened to my private conversation, Julian. Don't." I cut in, voice low. "Don't twist this into some betrayal of yours." I was lying on the couch, sick, trying not to throw up. I didn't go looking for anything. She looked away, jaw tight. "So is it true?" I asked. "You're meeting him after I leave?" She didn't respond. "Just say it." "Yes," she said finally. I didn't plan it at first, but then I thought, maybe it's what I need. I nodded slowly. "You thought you'd spend your honeymoon deciding whether to keep your husband." Her voice rose. "Julian, you're making this so black and white. You think you're perfect? You're always thinking 10 steps ahead, always arranging everything like it's a cargo manifest. You plan everything. You never just live." My hands tightened into fists. "You mean I took care of you? I saved for this trip, for this life. You wanted a dream, and I gave it to you. You gave me your version of a dream." I stared at her. The woman I'd married 2 days ago. My wife. "You don't want to fix this?" I asked. "You don't want to talk?" "I don't know," she said. And that was worse than no. I looked at her one last time. Really looked. And then I turned and rolled my suitcase to the door. She moved quickly, stepping in front of it. "You're just going to leave?" "I am," I said. "This was your decision. I'm just making it real." She reached for my arm, eyes wide. "Wait, Julian, don't do this." "I already did." I gently pushed past her. At the front desk, I checked out early. "Just me?" I told the clerk. "My wife's staying." I booked a Jeep to the valley, then a flight out of Quito. I had one last thing to do. I pulled out my phone and canceled Celeste's return train booking. It had been made using my account, under my frequent traveler number. Then I called her parents. They deserved to know. I kept it brief, honest, not angry, just the truth. By noon, I was gone, down the winding road, through the mist and into the valley. Alone, numb. Whatever I thought marriage would be, it ended on a mountaintop, with the sound of her laugh echoing in my ears. The messages started before my plane even touched down in Brussels. First a missed call, then a string of texts. "Celeste, Julian, what did you tell my parents?" "Celeste, you made everything worse." "Celeste, call me. We need to talk." I didn't respond. I just stared out the window, watching the city lights come into focus beneath the clouds. The numbness hadn't worn off. It sat in my chest like a weight, anchoring every breath. By the time I got home, there were over 20 messages. Celeste's tone bounced between desperate and accusatory. "Celeste, you stranded me." "Celeste, do you know how humiliating that was?" "Celeste, you're emotionally unstable. You ambushed me." She wasn't alone in her campaign. Her mother called once, her voice strained and uncertain. "Mrs. Perrin, Julian, she says you left her in the mountains. Is this true?" I said it was. I didn't offer details. I think part of her already knew. Her sister, Leah, was more honest. Her voice came through shaky but clear on the voicemail. "Leah, I'm not saying you were wrong, Julian. She's not doing well. She hasn't left the lodge. She's not talking to anyone." I sat in my apartment, blinds closed, suitcase still by the door, and listened to the whole thing. I didn't feel satisfaction. I didn't feel anything. Instead, I started making calls. I found a divorce attorney with good reviews and a quiet office on the south side. We set up a meeting for the following Monday. I asked what documents I'd need. He asked if I was sure. "I'm sure," I said. The next day, I changed the locks. Our spare key had lived in her handbag for months. Not anymore. I put her name on a list at the front desk of my building. "Do not buzz in." I closed our shared bank account, not because I thought she'd drain it, but because I no longer trusted the woman who swore she loved me 2 days before whispering secrets about another man on a mountain balcony. There was no explosion, no shouting match, no door slammed in rage, just silence. That night, I turned off my phone, left it in a drawer, sat on the floor of my kitchen with a glass of water and stared at the tile grout. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat. The reality of it crept in like fog. We had been married for 72 hours, and it was already over. It was 4 days later, just after 7 in the evening, when the buzzer rang. I was in the middle of heating up leftovers, some bland curry I barely tasted the first time, when I saw her name flash on the screen. "Celeste Perrin, guest access requested." I froze. For a second, I thought about pretending I wasn't home. Then the buzzer rang again, and then I heard it. A voice, faint through the entryway mic. "Julian, open the door." Behind her, someone else shouted, "You're going to regret this." I walked to the intercom and pressed the button. "Celeste, go home." "It's not her." The second voice snapped. It's her mother, right? Of course. She brought back up. I sighed. I'm not doing this. Julian, Celeste yelled. You are not going to ignore me like I'm some mistake you can delete. You are not coming up, I said. This isn't a conversation. There was silence for a moment, then banging. I walked over to the window. Sure enough, there they were, standing just inside the front entrance. Celeste in a pale coat, hair frizzed around her face, pacing like a caged animal. Her mother, arms crossed, lips pursed, clearly trying to contain the situation. I waited. Eventually, I heard footsteps in the hall. Not long after, someone knocked on my actual apartment door. 3 times. I didn't move. Julian. Celeste's voice was high-pitched now, not pleading, furious. You think you're going to paint me as some monster? You think you're the victim here? I said nothing. Another knock. Then the door handle rattled. Let us in or I swear, she started. I opened the door just enough to look out. You need to leave, I said. Now. Celeste pushed against the door. You coward. Her mother stepped between us. Celeste, stop it. He abandoned me in the mountains, she yelled. He took my train ticket. He called my family. He made me look insane. I opened the door another inch. You didn't need my help with that. She glared at me. Eyes sharp, red-rimmed. You twisted everything. You turned my own sister against me. You did that. She stepped forward suddenly and swung her arm toward the wall behind me. Something clattered. I turned and saw what she'd hit. A framed antique map of the Mediterranean I'd bought in Naples. It had shattered, glass everywhere. Celeste raised her hand again. You ruined my life. I raised my voice, steady and low. You lift your hand again. I call the police. You want a criminal record to go with the divorce. That stopped her. Her mother stepped in, gripping her arm. Enough. Let's go. Celeste didn't resist, but she didn't look at me either. As they turned to leave, her mother paused, glanced over her shoulder. I'm sorry, she said softly. I didn't know it was this bad. I didn't answer. I just closed the door and locked it. And then, for the first time since returning home, I smiled. Not because I was happy, but because I'd never been clearer. This was over, and I was finally in control. It didn't take long for her to retaliate. By the end of the week, I got an email from a law office I'd never heard of, something loud and theatrical like Vasseur and Vasseur Family Law. Attached was a formal countersuit for emotional distress. Celeste was demanding spousal support, damages for reputational harm, and, as the cherry on top, reimbursement for lost academic and travel opportunities. I sat in my living room, rereading the PDF while sipping cold coffee. The tone of it was surreal, like I'd woken up in a world where the woman who cheated on me at our honeymoon resort was somehow the victim. The lawyer she hired was exactly what you'd expect. Sharp suit, sharper cheekbones, probably billed by the syllable. His email began with, "We are deeply concerned about our client's emotional welfare," and ended with a veiled threat about litigation if we couldn't reach an amicable resolution. I forwarded it to my attorney with a single sentence. Let's bury this. Within a day, my lawyer filed a response and began compiling evidence, texts, calls, photos, booking confirmations, everything from our honeymoon timeline to the canceled train ticket. But more importantly, he asked me for proof of her instability, not just infidelity, something that would show her behavior wasn't just painful, but legally reckless. He didn't have to wait long. Celeste wasn't subtle. She posted a long, vaguely poetic rant on her blog titled Wounds in the Clouds. It sounded like a breakup ballad written by someone who thought passive voice was a personality. In it, she referred to me only as the husband, claiming I abandoned her in an unfamiliar country with no access to communication or funds. That was a lie. She had a working phone, Wi-Fi in the room, and a fully charged credit card. I had the receipts to prove it. Still, the blog post made its rounds. Her followers, mostly young women with a taste for linen clothing and watercolor emojis, shared it with sympathy. I stayed quiet, for now. Meanwhile, my lawyer had an idea. You think Elias's wife knows? He asked. I blinked. No, probably not. Then maybe she should. It felt petty, dangerous, but also fair. I knew Celeste had been careful not to put anything in writing, but I also knew women like Elias's wife didn't take kindly to being played. So I wrote a letter. Anonymous. Plain envelope. Typed in courier font like something from a thriller novel. No threats. No accusations. Just a timeline. A few screenshots of Celeste's Instagram geotags, and a simple message. Your husband was planning to meet mine's wife while she was on her honeymoon. I thought you might want to know. I dropped it in the mailbox on Rue de Flandre and walked away without looking back. A few days later, I started noticing little shifts. Celeste's social media slowed. Her followers began to question the story. Someone commented, "Didn't you say you picked the resort? Why would he strand you there?" One of her mutuals, a fellow professor, quietly removed her from their blog roll. The real sign came from Leah, her sister. She called and left a voicemail. Julian, I don't know what happened, but Elias's wife found out. He's out of their apartment. Celeste losing it. She's blaming you. I'm just giving you a heads up. I thanked her but didn't call back. By the end of the week, my lawyer had compiled everything. A clear narrative. Celeste wasn't just hurt. She was spiraling. Her behavior, her contradictions, her public outbursts, all of it now part of the official court file. She had turned our divorce into a circus, but I was holding the spotlight, and now it was pointed right at her. I hadn't expected her to show up in person again. After the home invasion, after the blog posts, after the legal firestorm she'd started with that smug lawyer of hers, I figured Celeste would retreat into the curated melancholy of her online following, posting black and white photos of teacups and long captions about healing through chaos. But instead, she doubled down. It started at my office. I was at the naval engineering firm, reviewing a contract for a new turbine prototype, when reception bust. "There's someone here asking for you," my assistant said. "She won't leave." My stomach turned. "Her name?" "She says you know." I didn't go out. I just told them to call security. They found her pacing by the espresso machine, hair in a messy braid, wearing some draped linen thing that looked more like a curtain than clothing. She was holding a drink, some oat milk concoction with a foam heart drawn on top, and threw it at the window as they escorted her out. Later that day, she posted a photo of the spill on her blog. "This is what it looks like when a woman is silenced," she wrote. The caption ended with, "You can destroy my story, but not my truth." I saved it. My lawyer would love it. The next night, she waited outside my building. She didn't buzz this time. She just stood across the street, arms folded, staring up at my apartment windows like she was trying to manifest a confrontation. I watched her from behind the blinds. Didn't move. Didn't give her anything. The following week, she confronted me in public, right outside a grocery store in Excel. I'd just come out with a bag of vegetables and a bottle of red wine when she stepped into my path. "You think you've won?" she hissed. "You're pathetic, Julian. Go home." She grabbed the paper bag from my hand and threw it on the pavement. Tomatoes rolled into the street. The wine bottle cracked. "You ruined everything." People stared. She didn't care. When she finally stormed off, I picked up what I could and walked home in silence. That night, I filed a formal police complaint. 2 days later, my lawyer filed for a restraining order. We now had multiple incidents: workplace disruption, public harassment, property damage, threatening behavior. The paper trail was starting to look like a checklist. And then, the news I'd been half expecting came through. Elias's marriage was falling apart. Leah texted me late one evening. "She's not talking to anyone. He moved out. His wife found the letter. They're done. Celeste says you wanted to ruin her life." I stared at the message for a long time. Did I? Maybe. But I hadn't lied. She wanted a fantasy, and when it collapsed, she needed someone to blame. It couldn't be her decisions, her duplicity, her arrogance. It had to be me. I was the villain in her story now. The cold engineer who abandoned her on a mountaintop and destroyed her chance at love. Let her believe it. Because every breakdown, every thrown drink, every half-true blog post, each one was another piece of evidence. Another line in the affidavit. She was unraveling in public, and I was collecting every thread. By the time mediation failed, we all knew what was coming. Court. There was no apology, no compromise. Just a series of tense legal back and forths that ended with Celeste's lawyer declaring in a clipped email, "We will see you in court." So we prepared. My attorney, a calm-eyed man named Mays who looked like he'd rather be gardening than litigating, started building our case like an engineer would a submarine, airtight, silent, and capable of withstanding a crushing amount of pressure. We pulled together financial disclosures, travel records, screenshots of blog entries, witness statements. Every outburst Celeste had made since the separation was logged. Every police report filed. Every complaint my workplace HR had documented. And then we focused on the narrative. "She wants to paint this as abandonment," Mays said one afternoon, his fingers steepled in front of his lips. But it was response. "We show the instability, the escalation, the premeditated deception. You didn't leave her. You escaped her." I wasn't used to thinking of myself that way. But he wasn't wrong. The court date was set for September. We had 2 months. In that time, Celeste's story kept shifting. At first, she claimed I'd stranded her without warning. Then, that I'd interrogated her privacy and become emotionally abusive. On her blog, she implied I had threatened her. In messages to her friends, she said I was mentally unwell. One even claimed I hallucinated the veranda conversation. But facts don't shift. Facts stay solid. The biggest shift wasn't legal. It was personal. Her family began to break ranks. Leah called again, this time in tears. "I'm sorry," she said. "I didn't know it was this bad. I thought she was just overwhelmed. But she's spiraling, Julian. She's paranoid. She's obsessed with the court. With you. She needs help," I said. "She won't get it." Even her parents began to pull back. Her mother stopped responding to Celeste's blog. Her father removed himself from her wedding photos online. And for the first time, I saw the cracks not just in our marriage, but in the entire image she tried to build around it. This life she curated like a Pinterest board. Intentional, beautiful, detached from consequence. It was unraveling. Meanwhile, I spent my evenings reading deposition drafts and listening to old jazz records I hadn't touched in years. I stopped checking her blog. I stopped looking at our wedding pictures. Instead, I looked forward, to the courtroom, to the judge, to the moment I could finally say, under oath, this is who she became. Not out of revenge, not out of spite, but because I was done letting someone else write my ending. And in court, the truth would finally be on record. By the end of August, I had cut every remaining thread. I changed my number, canceled the last of our shared accounts, wrote a formal statement to my employer asking them not to forward any contact attempts from Celeste or her attorney. No more leaks. No more unexpected appearances. No more games. The city quieted. Or maybe I just stopped listening. Her online presence remained active. Sporadic posts about growth through pain and finding identity beyond labels. Nothing directly naming me, but the subtext wasn't subtle. The photos became more abstract. Trees, shadows, an empty wine glass on a windowsill. One caption read, "He took the train. I took the fall." I didn't respond, not even internally. Instead, I reclaimed space. I started hiking again. It had been years. Before Celeste, before everything, it was something I used to do on weekends. Quiet trails outside Liège or down by the Ardennes. Long walks with a thermos of coffee and no signal. Just the sound of boots on dirt and air in my lungs. The first few hikes were stiff, mechanical, but something changed on the third one. I stood on a ridge overlooking a pine valley and realized, for the first time since the wedding, I wasn't thinking about her. Not the veranda, not the shattered map, not the trial, just wind and height, and the way my heart beat from effort instead of anxiety. That night, I made a decision. Once the divorce was finalized, I'd sell the apartment. Too many ghosts in the walls. Too many memories I didn't choose to carry. I started making a list. Sell the wine glasses we bought in Ghent. Donate the linens her mother gave us. Box up the wedding keepsakes and throw them in storage. Not out of anger, just a need to clear the ground. The court date was 2 weeks away. I was tired, but not afraid. She'd come into our marriage with a mask. I'd come in with hope. Now I was walking out with neither, just silence. And maybe, finally, peace. I didn't know where life would go after the ruling. I didn't have a 5-year plan, but I knew one thing. Wherever it went, she wouldn't be part of it. And for the first time in months, that thought didn't ache. It felt like breath, like space, like beginning.